हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू आवर यूट्यूब चैनल। तो आज हम लोग पढ़ने वाले हैं पैराडाइज लॉस्ट का एक क्वेश्चन जो कि है पैराडाइज लॉस्ट एज एन एपिक। अगर आपको इसका समरी देखना है तो इसका समरी का वीडियो भी हमारे प्लेलिस्ट में आपको मिल जाएगा। तो यहाँ पे देखिए, हम पढ़ेंगे इस वीडियो में कि पैराडाइज लॉस्ट एक एपिक है या फिर नहीं है। तो चलिए वीडियो को शुरू करते हैं। एपिक इज one of the oldest form that has come down to us from the ancient. An epic is a long narrative poem of considerable length celebrating heroic adventure, mythical or historical. It narrates great actions and depicts character in a great way. W.M. Dixon described the epic as a narrative poem organic in structure, dealing with great character and great action, which tends to idealize these characters and actions and sustains and embellishes its subjects by means of episode and amplifications. An epic has a large geographical background. It has a large number of characters. The hero does not monopolize attention to himself. The characters have superhuman statures. It presents a tale in which the natural mingles with the supernatural, human with superhuman. The major characters are usually associated with racial consciousness. An epic is a long narrative poem divided into 12 books. Milton's Paradise Lost is also a long poem and it too has 12 books. Originally it was divided into 10 books only, but for the second edition, book 7 and 10 were divided into two parts, and in this way Milton could conform to the centuries old traditions of an epic leaving 12 books. Milton believed himself to be a divinely inspired writer. He had imagined himself being capable of writing a magnificent and celebrated work. The epic he wrote eventually is concerned with the disobedience and hence the folly of man. It also depicts the restoration of mankind through the sacrifice of the Son. Thus it incorporates a subject which is both tragic and majestic. Every epic has an invocation to the great powers, particularly the muses and gods, to help in this adventure. Milton writes in this fashion: I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose or rhyme. The subject of an epic is ancient and national, taken from the legend and history of the country concerned. It is ancient and national, having its basis in history and legend. Milton's subject is also ancient, more ancient than that of any other epic poet. Homer and Virgil and other epic poets have taken their subjects from the scriptures. Milton's theme belongs to a time before the nations were born. He deals not only the creation of the universe and the fall of man, a subject of interest not to any nation, but to all mankind. Milton's epic is not merely national but universal in its appeal. Its action moves from heaven to hell and through chaos in which lies the newly created world of man. It concerns itself with the fortunes not of city or an empire but of the whole human race, and with that particular event in the history of the race which has moduled all its destinations. The sense of the action is universal, space and the time represent is eternity. It is about creation, damnation and redemption of man. Hence, these may be differences of opinion over the greatness of its style, but there is no controversy over the greatness and universality of its theme. Spencer's The Fairy Queen, so far as it represents the virtues of its true Christian, may stand in comparison with Paradise Lost, but in matter of the universality of the theme, even the Fairy Queen is left far behind. Another epic quality in Paradise Lost is to be found in pictorial description. Milton presents things through a series of pictures and not merely by the use of words. The telescopic vision of hell and the picture of the Garden of Eden are of eternal significance. Various mood and emotions are also successfully conveyed to us through the beautiful images. For example, the joy for the angels as having a matchless leader as Saturn, which Milton describes in a following words. Thus they are doubtful consultations dark, ended rejoicing in their matchless chief, as when from mountain tops the dusky clouds ascending. Such similes and metaphors add dignity and concepts they illustrate. These figures of speech are not suggestions but complete pictures full of vivid touches of reality. Milton has brought within the compass of his poem Paradise Lost a wider range of experience, literary, mythological, historical, geographical, astronomical and cosmological. He refers to Titanian, the river Lethe, Red Sea and the orb of the moon. C.S. Lewis is right when he said heaven and earth are ransacked for similes and allusion. This richness in variety does not obstruct our understanding and enjoyment of the poem, rather through the use of them. Milton guides our imagination towards the desired direction. The numerous army of the Saturn has been described, thick as autumnal leaves floating on the brooks in Vallombrosa. It resembles or reminds the description of the flocking of the ghost in the underground as we find in Aeneid Book 6. The characters in an epic are of larger than human size. Usually they are gods or incarnation of evils, like Lord Rama of the Ramayana and Lord Krishna of the Mahabharata are gods incarnate. Ravana is the evil incarnate. Gods take part in the Trojan War of Homer. In Milton's Paradise Lost, the chief characters are God, Saturn, Adam and Eve, Beelzebub, angels, etc. Though they suffer from human emotion like pride, jealousy, love, hate, but they are not ordinary human beings. In almost all the epics, these characters are symbolical. They represent good and bad forces and usually the victory of a good over the evil is shown by the author. In Paradise Lost, the characters are God and all these are exhibited in the clearest and most inevitable relation with the main event, so that there is not an incident, hardly a line of the poem, but leads back words or forward to this eternal theme. The poet narrates the adventures and war-like exploits of the hero, and his fate, victory or defeat is of national significance. There are action, thrills and sensation and heroic deeds of valor. In Paradise Lost also there is enough of movement, action and war. For example, there is the war in heaven resulting in the overthrow of Saturn and his followers. There is always some action, some movement, something or the other happening. Thus, in Book 1, Saturn flies from the lake of fire to solid land, then he calls his followers there. However, the real action of the epic consists of the war between good and evils to the ultimate triumph of the good and the defeat of evil. The action constantly shifts from good to evil and evil to good, from hell to heaven and vice versa. Virtue, suffering, patience and martyrdom are shown to be more heroic than physical valor or the so-called heroic virtue extolled by the ancient epic master. There may be found a combination of an epic and pastoral tradition in Paradise Lost, particularly in the description of the Garden of Eden when Saturn approaches there. Milton's pastoral setting, however, is not the periphery of the poem. It is the central location. We all aspire to visit it. At the beginning of Book 4, Milton describes ambition, aspiration, movement and activity of Saturn. Saturn appears to possess the dynamism of a typical hero, but we find that true beauty lies not in activity of the Saturn but in the Garden of Eden. The closer Saturn goes to Eden, the farther he is from God, whereas Adam, the father of mankind, is never closer to God than he is in the garden. In composing Paradise Lost, Milton has drawn upon classical epics by the Greek poet Homer and the Latin poet Virgil, European epics by Tasso and Aristotle, the Spenserian epic, the pastoral tradition, dramatic tragedy, the biblical narrative of the creation through the last judgment, and his own capacious theological work. Paradise Lost has the form of classical epic. It has also its manner in the tradition of the ancient epic. Milton plunges straight into the middle of the story instead of the beginning. From the beginning, Milton's opening is also dramatic. He begins at the most critical point in this story, that is, the moment when Saturn awakes from his stupor, holds a conference in pandemonium. In this way, the opening at once grabs our attention and raises Saturn to heroic dimension. Indeed, such is the glorification of Saturn that many readers are never able to overcome it, even when he is ultimately degraded. grandeur and sublimity are the keynotes of an epic, and Paradise Lost is more grand and sublime than any other epic. This grandeur arises from the essentially moral nature of his theme, from the cosmic vastness of his stage, from the greatness and loftiness of his style. As Matthew Arnold said, Milton is the great master of the grand style in the English language. Abundant and frequent allusions to classical myths and literature, to biblical mythology, to contemporary literatures, frequent Latinism and inversions, and above all the freaks of Homeric or epic similes all contribute to the sublimity and loftiness of Milton's style. The grand style exists constantly in all his great potential works, especially in Paradise Lost. In no other poet in the English language, not even in Shakespeare, do we find the grand style constant present. Milton produces the grand style through certain well-marked linguistic and artistic devices, which Word analyzes as follow: 1. Allusion, 2. Compressed construction, 3. Simile, 4. Musical verses. Since Paradise Lost is an epic, it has all the excellences of the epic style. The use of Homeric simile and classical allusions are abundant. Milton continually uses words and phrases which recall to the learned reader passage in Homer, Virgil, Horace, Dante, Spenser, and other great writers. According to Aristotle, an epic should have a happy endings. Paradise Lost is the story of the Paradise Lost. Unless Paradise Regained is included, happy ending is not possible. Actually, Milton wrote these books as a sequence, and in this respect, both should be read together. Paradise Lost alone cannot fulfill these requirements.